Pamela.
Morning, colleagues.
Just want to check if I can share my screen. Oh, you've got a screen on. No, that's fine. I'll share just now. Thanks.
No, you can share, Prof.
Good
I'll
morning,
stop
Prof.
sharing.
Shall I share? Okay.
Yes.
That's working, Sue.
Great. Thank you so much.
Hello, McKenna.
Hello, Lengua.
Hi, Stephanie. Hello, everybody. Oh, sorry, I
Hi.
forgot everybody's in the room.
Yes, everybody is in the
Sorry.
room. We do have a little bit of business that we have to go through before we start the workshop. So
Okay, no, that's fine.
yeah,
I'll unmute myself and turn off my camera.
that's fine. We'll wait a minute or two because people are still coming in.
Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Prof.
Good morning.
Stephanie.
Morning. Yeah.
And Sue.
Morning, colleagues.
Morning.
Morning.
Morning, everybody. Morning.
Morning.
Thank you.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I think we're going to start now. So I wonder if I could perhaps share my screen for a moment just to go through the business of the meeting. No, I can't make it. Oh, there we go. All right. Apologies for using a Word document on the screen. Can I just confirm that you can see it?
Yes, we can.
Yes, Prof.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes.
Yes.
Good. Thanks. So let me just get through this very briefly because we've got a very exciting meeting today. So just to, first of all, welcome everybody and to say thank you very much for joining us. I know there will be more people who are joining as we go, but we've got a bit of time for them to join us anyway. So today's meeting of the Community of Practice for Postgraduate Education and Scholarship has a slightly different structure. We're going to have a workshop which we will get to in just a moment. But before we do that, I just need to confirm that we have minutes from our previous meeting. I'm not going to go through all of them because they are there in a great deal of detail. But I would like to just say that last meeting was also a very successful one. It was contributed to by the fact that we had several relatively young academics talking to us about mentorship. And if you read the minutes of the meeting, you'll see that we did record and put into our minutes quite a lot of detail about how they were talking about the ideas around mentorship. So although you may not have been at the meeting last time, I do encourage you to read them because I think it makes fascinating reading to think about, and we covered some very important ground doing that. So there is the minutes. Let me just, for the sake of formality, ask if anybody has any questions. I'm going to go quickly through to the end. If there are any questions or any comments on this, you are welcome to ask them. There we are. We're getting to the end. As you can see, a lot of detail and a lot of questions and answers there at the same time. So you will see, colleagues, why I'm not going to go through it page by page. But we did say that in future we would talk further about mentorship, and we will certainly do that. In fact, the USAF AE CRS, the Advancing Early Career Researchers program, is going to be having another mentorship session in a couple of weeks' time. I think it's the 20th or 21st, on how to mentor. We're calling it a mentorship masterclass, and we will have that as a follow-up to the meeting of the community of practice last time. So that's the minutes, colleagues. I do need to ask if anybody could second the minutes, confirm that they are correct, and so that we can confirm them. Can I have somebody to confirm the minutes as correct and second them? Yep.
Yes,
Thank you.
Welcome, Chair.
Melody, thank you. So we have, and Violet, several people. Thank you very much indeed. Right, so let us move on with our agenda. What we have on our agenda today, on our program, is first of all an interactive workshop titled Use of Artificial Intelligence in Postgraduate Education and Research, and it's going to be facilitated by Professor Sue McKenna, who is with us and will be taking us through it all. We are hoping that this will be very interactive, so please do feel free to interact as you are invited to. Sue will be taking you through some activity rather than you're just sitting listening this time. We will have time for questions and answers afterwards, but I am going to simply hand over. Let me just do exactly that, hand over to Sue and say thank you very much, Sue, for, I think, taking on something which is going to be very interesting, a little different, and I think something from which we are all going to learn a great deal. We did send a little bit about Sue out with the agenda. I think many people know her. She is professor in education at Rhodes University and is one of our leading experts on postgraduate education. She has been the director of the Rhodes Postgraduate Centre, among many other things. So let me not go further than that, but to say, Sue, thank you very much. Over to you. We are very much looking forward to hearing from you now. So thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I will very briefly turn on my camera, not to show that I'm not AI, because one of the things I'm going to argue is that you could very well be watching me right now and unable to tell whether I'm really Sue McKenna or if your eyes are deceiving you. But I do so to hopefully humanize myself. For those people who don't know me, hello, particularly because I think the picture that was on the poster was from a few years ago. I wanted to show you how many, many more wrinkles I have since then. But I'm going to turn off my camera now. Because I've made my screen a full screen, I'm not going to see questions in the chat bar as I go through it. So if there's anything that needs to be answered immediately, Stephanie, if you can just interrupt me and let me know. Otherwise,
Sure.
I'll get to those at the end. But please, thank you. Please do feel free to put your questions into the chat bar as I go through. As Stephanie said, we'll have time for discussion at the end. And as Stephanie said, hopefully we're going to do a couple of activities together. So yeah, my name is Sue McKenna, and I just want to especially thank 4 colleagues, Neil Cram, Nicola Pallett, both from Rhodes University, Mags Blackie from Virginia Tech in the USA, and Nompilo Schumer from Stellenbosch University. We kind of bounce ideas about AI off each other, so I should just acknowledge them for being excellent sounding boards. I'm not here today to give you any answers, I'm afraid. I am, however, here to suggest that at times we're asking the wrong questions, and I'm going to try and convince us to be asking more questions more frequently amongst each other as colleagues, as supervisors, and with our postgraduate students. Before I get started, I just wanted to flag that the EQPE project will be sending out a survey. I just thought I'd let you know. So if you see an email from Shiloh Marsh, there's an online survey. We're collecting all sorts of data, and we're working with Stephanie's community of practice to really try and track what is the current practice around postgraduate supervision, postgraduate education. So just letting you know, so that if you see that in your email box, it is a legitimate group of academics who are trying to collate some information. I know that if your email box looks anything like mine, it's so full of spam, it's hard to tell what's what. So just a heads up that you will be seeing that in your email boxes. So I wanted to just start with a question, which is, what is postgraduate education for? And that may seem so self-evident that we don't really feel the need to talk about it. And yet I would argue that we really need to have ongoing conversations about what postgraduate education is for if we are to cope with the implications of AI, and indeed to cope with any other trends and variations and fluctuations that inevitably come. And for example, I'm thinking about the world's geopolitics at the moment. I just returned from a brilliant conference in Tanzania, the Cadastria conference. So many conversations about the future of higher education on this continent of ours, given the withdrawal of US aid, the anticipated withdrawal of EU aid. What is that going to mean for our higher education sectors? And I believe that it's moments of flux like that, like generative AI, like the political mayhem that is all around us, that really mean it's more important than ever that we have significant conversations about what the heck a university is for, what higher education is for, and in the case of today's conversation, what postgraduate education is for. We don't all need to agree exactly, but we need to have those conversations, because it's only those principled ideological positions that can hold us stable in times of flux. So perhaps you'd be so kind as to fling into the chat bar just your own initial thoughts on what is a postgraduate education for. I'll wait for a minute while you put those in there. I won't be able to see them at this stage, but I will be interested to look at them later. Don't worry about your spelling and grammar, just fling in any idea that jumps into your head. Okay, you can keep tapping while I move on. I just want to look at two things that possibly haven't come up. I hope that they have, but possibly haven't. The first is the idea that all higher education is meant to nurture a critical citizenry, and particularly at postgraduate level, where we are working with people who are not just students who are learning about the knowledge, but they are novice researchers learning about how to create knowledge. I think it's this demand that higher education nurtures a critical citizenry really is immensely important at postgraduate level. The white paper of 1997 says that the post-apartheid higher education sector, one of its principal purposes is to make sure that we have a critical mass in this country who can speak truth to power, who can look out for the vulnerable, who can challenge powerful organizations that might work against the environment or against particular social groups. To what extent are we ensuring that when we supervise our postgraduate students, when we curriculate postgraduate programs, that within the disciplinary norms and values, we are ensuring that we develop this criticality, this skepticism, this readiness to challenge, to question, to not take things for granted. Again, quoting the white paper of 1997, higher education is meant to be for the public good. It should be good for all of society to have universities in society. That's one of the reasons why our public sector is subsidized. It meant to be good for everybody in society to have universities in society. So even those who never want to go to university or who cannot, for various reasons, usually financial, access university, it should still be good for them that there are these things called universities. So at postgraduate level, where we are nurturing novice researchers to create knowledge, are we helping them to understand the responsibility of creating knowledge that should serve a good? It shouldn't be bad for the environment, bad for particular social groups. It should be good. It should add to the stock of knowledge in ways that help us to do better and be better. To what extent is the postgraduate education that we're all involved in actually attending to these two goals, which are specified in the white paper? And then, of course, also in the white paper, and the one that's more frequently remembered, is the idea that higher education is meant to contribute to the knowledge economy. This idea that we are in a post-agrarian, post-industrial economy where it is knowledge and skills every bit as much as it is products and agriculture. That I wonder if whoever's unmuted, if they, oops, sorry, I managed to stop sharing. There we go. That those people are that we are met, that the economy is built on knowledge and skills. And at postgraduate level, of course, we are trying to help our students to understand what is the cutting edge knowledge in the field on their topic and how is that knowledge produced. And at the time of masters, they need to master the methods for producing that knowledge. And at the level of doctorate, they're meant to actually contribute at the frontiers of the field. So that's what the higher education qualifications sub-framework tells us. So if we're meant to build knowledge at the frontiers of the field, to what extent are we managing to do this? And where does artificial intelligence fit into this? How can it help students contribute to knowledge at the frontiers of the field in a more efficient way, in a more powerful way? Or conversely, and that's one of the things I'll be arguing, to what extent might the use of generative AI actually prevent them from becoming these people able to contribute at the frontiers of the field? What I think is very important to note in the HEQSF's description of masters and doctorate and in the doctoral standard is that there is two outcomes of a master's and a doctorate. The one is the body of knowledge. So it's the thesis, the publications, the creative output, whatever it might be. And the other is the knower. And at master's and at doctoral level, it's very clear that we have to help students to create a body of knowledge, but they also have to become researchers. And so if AI enables students to present this fantastic piece of knowledge, which we can verify is indeed a contribution at the frontier of the field. And increasingly, AI can do that. AI can create knowledge with all sorts of caveats that I'll discuss in a moment. But AI can create new knowledge. So if students use AI to create the new knowledge, then tick, yes, it's achieved that goal. I see no problem with that. But if they've used AI and that has prevented them from becoming these masters of methodologies, these people that are able to contribute in ways that cannot yet be imagined to their fields, that they have become researchers in identity, in skill set, in knowledge. If the AI use enables the production of good knowledge, but does not enable the nurturing of the knower, then it's a problem. So there we have. So how do we get to achieve this? How do we achieve this idea of critical citizenry, of contribution to the public good, and of people who can participate in the knowledge economy as these researchers, having the expertise, the identities, the knowledge, and the skills? I found this a very, very useful framing from Punya Mishra. If you don't follow Punya Mishra and you're interested in all things generative AI, I strongly suggest you do. He has a blog and has very useful thoughts. And one of the things in a recent blog was to look at this, sort of, he's mapped out in these 4 quadrants. So on the left-hand side, you've got the idea of knowledge of AI. So to what extent do our students and ourselves understand how AI works? In my experience, a lot of students who experiment with AI, they've used AI, usually ChatGPT, because they aren't even aware of the other tools that are out there. They have no idea of the way in which it works. They seem to think of it very much like a Google search. And so that makes them, have a very low knowledge of AI. They don't understand how large language models have been trained on massive corpuses. They don't understand how these large language models are able to identify and replicate patterns in text and meaning in topics. They don't understand that the creation of new texts by generative AI is simply using your prompt or your command to create a brand new text, but on the basis of its identification of previous patterns. And because they don't understand any of that, and they don't understand that generative AI has been specifically trained to always sound confident. It's been trained in very particular linguistic features that demonstrate confidence. Because they don't understand that, they have very low AI expertise. So they might be, even if they're playing with AI, they have a low knowledge of AI. If we look at the bottom the bottom, what do you call those things? Line, the horizontal axis, we see the knowledge of the domain. So that's expertise in the field that they're writing about. And of course, our students, by virtue of being students, generally have a low expertise. They don't know the topic that they're writing about. So most of our students are sitting there in that yellow bottom corner where they have very low understanding of how AI works, and they have low understanding of the thing, the topic, the phenomenon that they're asking the AI to write about or to analyze, or as the case may be. And so they are at the most vulnerable. They are at the highest risk of being fooled by AI, of falling for what's known as hallucinations or bot shit, of losing the possibility of a transformational relationship with knowledge, which is what higher education is meant to offer. They are at the most vulnerable on every possible level, not just in being tricked, so to speak, by the AI, but in the possibility of their losing out on the powerful educational opportunity that we want to offer them. A few of our students would be in the top quadrant there, with high knowledge of AI. They have understood how AI works, but they don't know the domain knowledge. So they're kind of in the false confidence trap, where they know that they can't just trust AI. They know that AI is biased. They know that AI replicates patterns rather than comprehending content. They understand all of that, which makes them hesitant and quite rightfully skeptical. But they don't have the expertise with which to engage which the AI produces. So our students are generally in that left-hand domain. Our academics hopefully have a high knowledge domain. So hopefully all of us know a lot about our own field, and we're constantly reading and keeping up to date, and we're very aware of the debates, the methods, the concepts, theories in our field. But some of us might be quite low in knowledge of AI. So you would have the expert's advantage. At least if you used AI, you'd be able to scrutinize it. You'd be able to see flaws in it. And that's really important. But if you hand over your rest of your career to AI, you'll lose that expert's advantage because you'll be relying on the expertise of the AI, which may or may not maintain an understanding of shifts in the field. And then some are in that top right-hand domain, which is the dual expertise, which is where you've got high understanding of how AI works and you've got high expertise. And that really is the quadrant in which we would all like to be and we'd like to move our students into, because that's a quadrant in which you can use AI in meaningful ways to enhance your efficiency, to take care of mundane tasks, but you would be very skeptical of using it for more intellectual tasks, and where you did, you would scrutinize it carefully. The reason that dual expertise, that Mishra calls that dual expertise a challenge, is because a recent report from a Microsoft report actually showed that the more domain knowledge you have, the less benefit or the less time benefits AI will give you. It still can give you enormous time benefits, especially taking care of mundane tasks. But because you can't just take it for granted and cut and paste and accept it as it is, you have to bring your domain expertise to whatever it is that's been generated by that AI. You are going to take more time than someone who's sitting in this side, or particularly down in this novice's dilemma. I need to move on so we can get onto the very practical side. This was just an example of ChatGPT explaining how horizontal stabilizers work on a plane, but the illustration that they gave, I don't think you need to have much domain expertise to realize why that one's problematic. So what I want to do is to have a quick look at a few AI tools. I was really conflicted about whether to start with the AI tools or whether to start with what I see as our responsibility in nurturing critical AI literacy, which should come first. I decided to go with the AI tools, but I'm going to bring in a whole lot of cautions and provisos once I've gone through them. I want to make very clear a few things. Firstly, use Zotero if you can as your citation tool. One of the things I've found is that most of these AI tools seem to work with Zotero very well. So if you're wanting to use AI and pull in your own readings from your own Zotero library, it's really easy to do on almost all of them, whereas for some reason RefWorks and some other citation indices seem to battle. So that's just something, if you are planning to change citation software, Zotero is free and it works really well with AI. The second thing I want to say is that there is a difference between paid and free versions of all the AI. Most of our students are going to be using the free version. That does worry me ethically. That sort of digital divide between global north and global south in particular is likely to get greater, because the paid versions generally allow you to do more searches, more sophisticated searches, and so on. And then a big warning is that I'm not the expert on using AI. I'm just sharing some of the AI that I've used and played around with. I'm sure that some of you have far more expertise and might be willing to share some ideas in the conversation at the end, or might be willing to jot in some comments and tips into the chat bar. I just am a person who loves technology, and so I've played around a lot, and most of the time I don't actually know how to do things. I just click and figure it out, and if I get stuck, I'll ask YouTube. I generally don't watch or follow the tutorials that come with all of these AI. People who are less ADHD than I am would probably do it the right way. You'd go onto a new tool, you'd watch all the training material that comes with that tool. I don't do that. But because I don't do that, because I am kind of intuitively try things out as I go through them with you today, I won't know. I don't know how to do things until I just click and figure them out, even with tools I've already used. So the three that I'm going to very quickly introduce you today, you may be familiar with: Claude, Elicit, and Julius. So Claude is a large language model like ChatGPT. It's much better, I think, than ChatGPT. It's just an open model. I'm just going to see if I can share my screen, let me go, firstly, let me do something with you. I'm going to ask you, I'm going to look very quickly in the chat bar. What I'd like you to put in the chat bar quickly now is to put in a topic, because I want to play around with a few topics. So can you quickly in the chat bar put in a topic, a phenomenon, something you're researching, a title of a study that you want to do, so that I can use some of your examples as I go. I'll try and move between them. Liesel, resilience in an unequal space. Can you give me a little bit more detail than that? Unequal, is it in higher education or is it in society? And hello, Liesel. Okay, social media impact on reputation manager. Okay, I'm going to take that one, but I'm going to come back to these other ones in a moment. Okay, social media impact. Keep them coming because I'm going to get you to do some things in a moment. I think I'm going to try and do. Let me move things out the way. Let me try and use Jenny for this actually. Please write a paper. So this is actually one I didn't mention, Jenny. I was going to share a thesis. There's another one, thesisai.io, but I see that it no longer has a free version and I haven't subscribed to it. But thesisai.io, which is the one showing on the screen now, is an AI that will write a whole thesis for you. It takes about 20 minutes with references. You can see why these things are dangerous. Right, so let me ask Jenny, please write an academic journal article with references about social media impact. Okay. Oh, sorry, because I've got other things open. I'm battling a little bit. Okay. Okay, so there's our article. How long should we have it? Article of 3,000 words. I've got the free version of Jenny. I'm not sure whether the free version will allow a 3,000 word article. I think it's thinking. Accept. So obviously you can accept it in chunks. Accept. Accept. Okay, so it's busy writing it for me, and each time you can tell it to change things around, and you can go and change the referencing. Let's say we actually want Harvard referencing, and it'll change our referencing for us. So what you have here, and if you're not familiar with Jenny or Thesis.io, through thesisai.io, you need to become familiar with this simply because your students are familiar with it. Not, I want to be very clear, because you need to understand how important it is to catch your students using AI. I don't think that that's a useful thing at all. And if there's time, I'll explain why. But rather because if your students are doing this, they are missing out on the whole purpose of a higher education. So the tools that I actually want to share with you today are Claude, Elicit, and Julius. Claude is like a large language model, like ChatGPT. I think it's a much better one. I think it's a more sophisticated one, and especially for academic conversations, I think it's a much better one. Elicit is for literature reviews and for searching for literature and summarizing literature and comparing literature, and Julius is for data analysis. Now, for each of these, there are a million other versions, other AI tools out there. These are just the ones I'm going to talk to you today, and then if there's time, I'll talk to you about Tutor Pro. Claude. So let me start by looking at Claude. For those of you who don't know, I want to quickly go. So apologies for this. I'm moving backwards and forwards between your screen and my screen. Non-profits as social entrepreneurship. I'm going to use that one for Claude. Let's go to Claude. Claude, where are you? I thought I had it open. Okay, never mind. I'm going to go to Claude. Claude, there we go. Okay, please tell me about nonprofits as social entrepreneurship. What are the pros and cons? So it's a very simple one. So this is Claude 3.7 Sonnet. It's the free version. You can get Claude, I think the most up-to-date one is 4.0, if I'm not mistaken. It's called Haiku. It is, oh, it's 3.5, I beg your pardon. Anyway, it's given us a set of lists. Yeah, it says, would you like me to expand? I'd like you to rewrite the above, not as a list, but as but as, what can I say, as paragraphs. Yeah. Okay, can you please, oh, by the way, you see I keep saying please. I thought I did that just because I was, well brought up, but there is research that shows that AI does respond to tone. It's machine learning, so it not only was it trained on a corpus of data, but it's learning and learning. So weirdly, and perhaps this freaks some people out, the more polite you are, the better answers you get, according to some research. Can you please rewrite the above with references to academic texts and include a reference list? Okay, let's see how we go. While I'm doing this, if you don't feel like watching my screen, feel free to open Claude yourself. As I said, I'm just using the free version here, and give it a go. I think it's a good idea to play with these things, even if you are terrified and resistant. There are very good reasons to say that AI is evil and you should not use it at all. I actually can be completely convinced by some of those reasons. So I'm not here to say I'm not here to convince you to use AI. I'm here to say that we need to talk to our students about AI. We need to expose them to conversations that go far, far, far beyond the wholly useless conversation about we will catch you if you use AI, and instead engage with why should you bother to have an intellectual engagement with knowledge in the world where AI can do it for you. Okay, so that's a simple example of ChatGPT. Remember, ChatGPT is just a large language model, so there is the possibility that some of these references are not real. There's the possibility that some of these references are bot shit that have been made up. And it's no good asking. I've seen people who then say, are all of these references real? Because our large language models are trained to present responses with confidence. So they double down. Yes, they are absolutely real. And even if you ask them of a particular one, say, is this one real? They'll say, yes, it is. And then you can say, no, I've searched and it's not on Google Scholar. Maybe then I'm totally animating this. Maybe finally the AI will say, yes, you are correct. In fact, it does not exist. But it won't immediately respond to that question because of its training to be confident. So there's an example of Claude, very much like ChatGPT. I just believe it's a better one. I mean, it can do anything from, find me a recipe that uses up old spinach in my fridge, to write a love poem for my partner that includes the following 3 funny incidents. The real question I want to ask is a love poem still a love poem if it's written by technology? I don't know. These are the questions I actually like thinking about. Right, the next one I said I would talk to you about is Elicit. So elicit.com. So Elicit is really useful. I only have this one, the plus. You can see I'm logged in already, but you can get the basic one for free, but I actually pay for the current one. Let's go And what Elicit does, it's also a large language model in that it identifies patterns in text, and it uses those patterns to generate a new document. But what it does, the difference between this and say Claude or DeepSeek or ChatGPT is that it's trained on peer-reviewed published materials. So it is trained on a huge corpus of data, like all AI, including much data which is not peer-reviewed publications, but it draws its conclusions from its training on peer-reviewed publications. I'm going back to the chat bar to choose a different one, a different question. Role of resilience in postgraduate students. Let's go back here. Sorry. Here we go. What is the role of resilience in postgraduate students? And I've asked it to do a research report. I mean, I could have asked it to do a workflow, but let's just stick with this. So I wanted to be a fast one, just to look at top 50 papers. I could do balanced because I pay. So I could also have this one. I don't pay the expensive amount for that one. So I could screen up to 500 papers and then just extract from the top 25 papers that it identifies as the most useful. But that takes a bit longer. So for the purposes of today, I'll use this one. And I'm going to generate a report. So it's going to find 50 papers that relate to, so it's searching, there we are, it says it's searching 127 million papers to find 50 that relate to my topic, and then it identifies 50 and it shows you a whole lot of them, and you can choose which ones you would like it to use, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave it to do that itself. So I'm just letting it run by itself. You can step in at any stage. You can pause, choose your own papers you want to include, exclude certain papers. So what it's doing now is, as you can see on the right of my screen, it's filtering the studies based on my inclusion criteria. And I didn't give it a lot of inclusion criteria. I just gave it that one prompt. I could include inclusion criteria like it has to include only empirical studies, or it has to be based in the global south, or whatever. You can choose certain inclusion and exclusion criteria. Again, if you've got the paid version, you have more possibilities. It's now extracting the data, so it's now screened and chosen the 10 that, based on my criteria, it believes are the most relevant to my topic. It's now extracting data from it, and it will soon generate the report. Oh, it's only 22%, but hopefully it'll catch up quickly. While we're waiting for it to finish, you might like to go to elicit.com yourself if you haven't done so before, and play. Just put in your own topic. Many people just put in the topic, so they would just write resilience and postgraduate education. I think it's helpful to write in full sentences, and a lot of the literature suggests that prompts that are polite, that are in full sentences, that are conversational, and that are clear. That's so important. You can't be vague. Until especially if you've got a paid version, it will track your previous queries, so it will actually start to adapt and understand some of your background, which is again a very scary thing to consider. But especially if you're using the free version, it doesn't know whether you're an academic, whether you are asking in the field of higher education, whether you're asking in the field of industry, whether you're asking, so give it as much information, be clear, be specific, write in full sentences, be polite, and maybe I'm overemphasizing the be polite thing. I've seen people put in extremely blunt queries and get responses none the same. It is, after all, a piece of technology. And then once it's done that, and it'll do that very shortly, it will generate a paragraph that gives an overview of those top 10 papers. If you're using the free version, it'll only be top 5 papers. And it gives you a table which tells you the details of those top 10. And you can then add additional things you wanted to look for, like, is it an empirical study? Where is the study take place? So you'll see that in a moment. What's very important to do with your students, if you are going to get involved in this kind of work, is to get students to use a tool like this on a reading that you as a class have already discussed, a reading that your students are already very familiar with, because that enables them to compare the understanding, the key argument as they understood it, the key issues as they understood it in their reading, and compare that with the summary produced by the AI. And 99% of the time, they're going to go, wow, this is perfect. But it's important the 1% of the time when they go, actually, you know what, they missed something. Or much more than just 1% of the time, this is an excellent summary of the text. But the specific part of this text that is most pertinent to me and my study and my interest is not in the summary. So it's important for them to start seeing that when you read an article and engage with an article using human intellect, you are often in the process not just of understanding it, which is what we expect our undergraduates to do, but of making connections between that article and other articles, and very importantly, making connections between that article and your own viewpoints, and that article and your own proposed study. And that's where the AI often falls short. It's going to offer a student a summary, but if the only thing the student reads is that summary, they may have missed the very gem in that paper that they can draw on to build a claim of their own. And I think telling people that is not as effective as actually getting them to see that, getting them to in a class, you know, all of you have your laptops open and have different people using different things. DeepSeek, ChatGPT, Jenny, Elicit, Claude, and to all of you upload the same article that all of you are already familiar with and compare the summaries. So give the prompt. In the case of Elicit, that's generally what it does. It summarizes articles. But in the case of those others, ask it to summarize the article and compare what comes out and have a conversation about that. My real worry is that handing over that intellectual work, that cognitive load to the technology actually prevents students from having that personal relationship with the text, the personal relationship with knowledge. I'm very aware that time is flying by, and even though I chose, yes.
Before you move on from this one, can I just ask you to comment on something? So I've never used Elicit before, and I have been playing with it while you've been talking. And I wrote a fairly simple, please write an article request, and it has come back several times with the comment, more precise questions work better. Try adding elements such as research focus, methodology, outcome, and so on. Is that something that happens all the time? I mean, I appreciate I haven't been thinking very hard about what I'm asking, but
Yeah.
is this a feature of Elicit that it sort of guides you?
Yes, absolutely. Elicit will guide you, and you can ignore that suggestion. But what it's sort of saying is, because the question is not that precise, chances are what Elicit is able to provide you is not going to be as useful as it could be. So the Elicit is giving recommendations of how to sharpen the prompt. And Elicit,
that's interesting.
Elicit's good like that. So bear in mind that I'm using the kind of what would be available, well, not quite, but I'm doing the shorter one where it only is reading 50 rather than 100 articles, but it is taking quite some time. Having said that, it is literally going through those 50 or 100. I'm going to move to another piece of software, and I'm going to come back to this one and have a look at it in a moment, because it's now changed it to 5 minutes. So I'm going to come back. So Claude is a large language model that you can use for anything, for recipes, for advice on how to put together a photo album, for whatever. Like all large language models, it is based on a corpus of data, and it is trained to be confident. Elicit, similarly, large language model, but trained on academic articles. So now I want to go on to Julius. Julius is one of many pieces of software that does data analysis. Julius does both qualitative and quantitative data analysis. I have done some screen capturing here because it does take time, and I didn't want to waste all your time for you watching, as you saw just now with Elicit, watching the AI working. When I say it takes time, it probably takes about 5 or 10 minutes. So Julius works on workflows. So in this case, I just asked it to generate a workflow. It's just its wording, don't worry about it. Each of these AI use their own trendy terms. So in this one, this is what I wrote in the middle here. I said, develop a report on the cost of higher education around the world. I did that just because I happen to have an Excel spreadsheet with a whole lot of data about the costs of education in different countries. And so I thought, let me use that as my data. You can, of course, ask it to generate its own data. You can ask it to find data on the internet. But if you've got data, transcripts of interviews, lab measurements, whatever it might be. So I said, develop a report on the cost of living around the world. The report should include reflection on the cost of living in a specific country and should take into account the cost of accommodation, visa, insurance, and so on. Not a great prompt. If I had given it more time and thought, maybe I would have written a better one. But anyway, so then I said, so then it moves to the next step and it says, what do you want to do in response? And I said, please use the attached data set. To which it responded, it seems that there are no files attached. So just to let you know that when you stuff up, which we all do, it will help you. So, you know, I said, use the attached data set, but of course I didn't attach anything. It seems there are no files attached to this conversation. Please try uploading the data set again so I can assist you with it. So then I click on user input and I clicked on file upload, and I uploaded the file. Just have a note of these others. You can prompt, which is where you can add more prompts if you're not happy with the way it's going, as I think you saw me do with Claude. So please, can you rewrite this, you know, looking at this issue or whatever. But you can also edit the embedded code. That's the nice thing. Certainly doesn't help me, I'm not a coder. But for those of you who are coders, the nice thing about Julius is that it actually shows you the coding as it goes. So if you want to tweak the coding rather than using English words and prompts, you can actually pause and tweak the coding. But for now, I just had to upload the file because I'd forgotten to do that. So I promptly uploaded my file, and there's my file that I uploaded. International education for different countries. So that was a document that I had with all my data. I'd had to analyze the cost. And this is, as I said, you can actually see the coding as it's happening. It uses Python. And so you can click and edit the coding. So if you want to wait for it to happen and then give another prompt, please more foreground this more, or I don't understand how you did that. You can use English, but those of you who are coders, you can actually pause and edit the coding if you so wish.
Sue, there's a question that's relevant to what you're talking about right now,
Yes.
from Liesel actually. If you upload that data set, how
Yes.
secure is the data? Is it protected or does it become part of the public domain?
Yeah, so that's a really important question. And it really depends whether you're asking logical Sue or paranoid Sue. They promise, this particular software promises that it is not made available, but who reads the small print? If you were wise, any AI, you would read the small print, because not all of them do not. ChatGPT, for example, uses whatever you upload as part of its training material, and already some companies have gotten in trouble because they are sharing corporate secrets via ChatGPT, which come up in someone else's query. So ChatGPT makes clear that, you know, it doesn't promise it'll keep whatever you upload. This lot say that they will. Paranoid Sue says I'm not sure that I trust anything in big ed tech, because by the time the cat's out the bag and there's a court case, it's too far down the line. I mean, one of the biggest problems with AI is that it was trained on materials that are copyrighted. I mean, illicit, obviously, on all those journal articles, but ChatGPT and so on every article you've ever written, any social media post you've made, newspaper articles you've written that may be owned by the newspaper, may be owned by you. And of course, ChatGPT now in the field of visuals and movies and Canva and all the other AI that's used to create art and films and comic strips. They're all trained on work that was owned by human beings. So, you know, there's the reality that if we were determinedly moral on these issues, we would actually not, I think, engage with them at all. But Julius does say that whatever you upload is used only for the purposes of your query. What I was going to say about it being trained on all the open source materials is by the time ChatGPT was launched, then the court cases happened, like New York Times and others, taking OpenAI to court and saying, you know, how dare you, you've used materials that are copyrighted to train your machinery to produce new text, but really it's just replicating patterns that we have produced. And that court case frittered away because the genie's out the bottle and the cat's out the bag. So I'm inclined to think that even in cases where it assures you that your data won't be used, maybe it's worth thinking about it, but I'm not an expert on data security at all. So I think it's something that needs to be, a conversation probably needs to be had with people who are more data experts than I am. I can see that Fredericks has got his hand up. Would you like to come in quickly?
Yes, please. Sorry, man. I don't know if I'm asking a very stupid question, but nevertheless, the data sheet that you have uploaded, is it an Excel sheet? Have you put the data in specific formatting already when you upload the document?
That's not a stupid question at all. It's an example of a question where there's probably tutorials that explain how to do all of this in Julius and whatever tool you're using, but I don't have the mind to watch tutorials. So I'm inclined to just play around, and if things don't work, I figure it out, or I go to YouTube and ask the question on YouTube, and there's always someone who has asked the question before and figured it out and made a short video. I can tell you that in this case, it's very intuitive. So I have it as an Excel spreadsheet. But you can put it as a CVS sheet. You can put it as a Word document. It's a very intuitive. If the software has problems, it will explain to you. You know, is this a particular? You know, is this line headings? If it's not sure whether the first line in your Excel spreadsheet is a heading or not, or you didn't put in headings and it needs to query. You know, it seems that column C is a currency. What currency is it in? You know, it's very intuitive. If it's interviews, it can generally figure out who's the interviewer and who's the interviewee. It can figure out that this is interview 1, interview 2, but that's not to say that it'll always get it right. But generally speaking, it can use a lot of different formats. Brett, you want to ask something?
Thanks, Sue. I'm finding this very interesting, but I have a question that may be germane to a lot of people here because we're struggling with this at WITS. I mean, our ethics clearance policies say that in, for example, qualitative studies, but not necessarily, that only the student and supervisor will see the data. And we have students quickly submitting their interview data up to various AI agents. And our ethics people are going mad because they say that's a violent, blatant breach of the ethics contract that we've signed. And so I really worry about everybody not being on board with exactly how the sharing happens. And I just err on the side of caution and say, under no circumstances can a third person, even if it's a machine, share the data. So I was just wondering what you guys are doing there and what everybody's thoughts are on that.
Yeah, again, I just have questions. I don't have answers. I mean, I do think it's important to note that It is a machine. So you're not sharing it with a third party. You're sharing it with a piece of software, just as if you were sharing it with the SPSS, or you were sharing it with whatever. The big difference, of course, and it is a very important difference, is whether or not it is, which goes back to the earlier question, whether or not it can go from your uploading it to the software to becoming part of the repertoire of that software, the database of that software, whether it then might become accessible to anyone other than the student. So my argument wouldn't be the uploading of the data to the AI is a sharing with a third party. My argument would be how secure, how certain are we that it would only be used by the AI within that search? And so I think that I don't know what the answer is. I think that if students are going to use AI, they need to say that in their ethical application, and they need to specify which AI, and they need to specify the extent to, and they can quote from that AI, like Julius, they can quote from the Julius platform to say, this is how it's secured, this is how I can establish that it cannot be accessed by anyone else. This is the process by which I've done it.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, it's interesting methodologically, because they'd have to put that in their participant information sheet too. And I wonder how that would shift participation in the participants.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see that also with qualitative work, where people are increasingly using AI to summarize interviews. But I don't think that the Zoom AI is particularly good at summarizing the interview or writing minutes. It's a great first start, and I think it saves time. But I don't think if a human doesn't go in and add and delete, it can get things very wrong. I'm gonna come to you in a moment, Lynn. I'm just going to go through the next couple of slides, but keep your hand up so I don't lose you. So then you could see that it then, using my data, it came up with this chart, which I actually just extracted. You can change the formatting because it's a terrible format, but there you can see, which countries are the most expensive. These were all postgraduate tuitions, by the way. So I was looking at masters and doctorate. You can see that the most expensive is over here, USA. Very interesting that the most expensive ones are the ones that have the biggest market. So here we've got Australia, I think it is. Yeah, here we've got Australia and Argentina together. If I'm not mistaken, it's hard to read on the version I've got. UK, USA, UAE. Interesting to look down here. South Africa. Oops, sorry. That was South Africa over. Terrible picture. That's South Africa over there where my mouse is. If you can see my mouse, I'm not sure. We are actually really cheap for postgraduate education. This is just an example, I think. Then I asked it to explain. Then I asked it, I just want to share an example of a bad query. So I then said, can you explore the impact of program duration on costs? Because some of the programs are 2 years, and some of the programs are 3 years, and some of the programs are 4 years. And I wanted to, see, okay, this might be a hell of a lot more expensive, but you can do it in a year. So I wanted it to do that exploration. But that actually ended up being a completely useless query, because all it did is it showed me, I would have to ask another query to get something useful, because all it did is showed me an average. So the average of the 1 year courses was $34,000 a year. The average of the 1.5 year courses was 35, but it doesn't tell me where or when. So I needed a better prompt. So I just thought I'd show you an example of how you can ask a prompt and it gives you something that's completely useless. That's not what I wanted. And then you can, it does carry on. And it says if you'd like to visualize this data, and it's really good at drawing up infographics, mind maps, graphs, and so on. I'm going to go very quickly back to our elicit to see how it's doing, and then we're going to ask Lynn her question. So here we go. This is that question that we asked elicit. If you'll remember, elicit just searches for journal articles and it summarizes them. So what it has done, because I asked it to do this, is it has looked at what is the role of resilience in postgraduate education. It gives us a summary sentence, acts as a protective mechanism, buffers against academic stress and promotes mental well-being. It has given the top articles, given us a nice little summary of them, tells us what the common themes are, analysed 10 papers using after an initial pool of 50. It used 6 screening criteria, which you can edit. So you can say, I don't want you to screen for this, I want you to screen for that. And you can find out more about the methods there. And here it actually lists the articles. So you can ask it to then include and exclude certain articles. You can ask it to include a new, so what it gives you is population size. Oops, sorry. Now I've gone and messed it up. Gives you population size, it gives you country. You can add, yeah, I'm sorry, I've messed that up. You can add columns. So for example, you might want to say, indicate which are empirical studies, indicate only include those which have studies. Okay, here, let's give the population size. And the star will take you to where it is. You can save it as a PDF. You can give it another query and ask it to expand it. So summary, it's got 5 qualitative, 3 quantitative, 2 mixed methods. This is just an overview of these studies, what were the primary focus, and then it gives you a kind of a thematic analysis, and it tells you where you can find those information. So, of course, the great thing about this is it's useful for students who are just starting out in a new field to get an idea of key, and you can also make it only search for certain timeframes. You can also make it search for only documents that have a very high citation count. So if you only want to know sort of the top articles in the field that everyone has read and citing, you can do that. So it's quite useful for students to have this very simple entrance into a field. My worry is that they stop there and they think, oh, now I understand the field. I know what's going on, but they haven't read the actual article. So not only might they have missed things that Elicit doesn't deem worthy of including in the summary, but they haven't actually done an intellectual engagement which enables a transformative relationship with knowledge. Getting this to summarize is a very instrumentalist process. It's not the kind of deep intellectual process that we engage when we read articles. Another useful tool, though, is after they've done that intellectual process, is to use Elicit to upload their articles, the ones that they are referencing, and run a query. Because Elicit might help them understand it differently, might help them identify, note something that they've missed, and so on. Lynn, let's hear your question. Lynn, do you want to unmute yourself?
Sorry, I was just trying to unmute. It links your early concern, Sud, with Brett's comments on the kind of ethics issue. And I mean, the thought that just sprung to mind is that if the versions that are the paid for versions possibly offer let's say the better guarantees that the data that you're submitting are only being used to answer your particular question. It does raise questions about what our institutions are doing in terms of making those available, and possibly even kind of having policies that say, if you're going to do this, and if you're going to use these for your data, you have to use these particular versions, which are the paid for versions, and you have to acknowledge those. It was just, a question that sort of struck me as I was listening to the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. I don't think our universities are ready to take that kind of move yet. But certainly in the global north, I don't know of any. I don't know. I'm quite possibly wrong. I don't know of any universities that have done that. Having said that, a lot of universities are using AI as teaching tools, AI for providing feedback, AI for supposedly detecting students using AI, which hopefully I'll have a few minutes to talk about in a moment, about why that is not only problematic at a logistical level, but it's problematic at a moral level. So a lot of our universities, ironically, while they're forbidding students, are using AI in ways that I think are very problematic in terms of their own teaching and learning. So institutions are making decisions about integrating AI for the lecturers in ways I find morally troubling, and forbidding students. So the big issue, of course, is I don't think Global North universities do need to do that because their students can generally, of course, it's a generalization, can generally afford the paid versions. They're not very expensive. Whereas in the Global South, and certainly in South Africa, most of our students can't afford the paid versions. And so the worry is that if we wait, as we always seem to do, for decisions made in the Global North universities, we'll be waiting forever. And the problem, the digital divide, our students are at the wrong end of the digital divide. So I think these are conversations that we do need to have sooner rather than later. Jude, I see your hand, but I'm going to quickly move on to the next slide. Actually, no, let me take your question and then I'll discuss this slide. Hi, Jude.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, so I mean, the AI space is an evolving area that, putting any ring around it now will be quite premature. But again, it's also using with extreme caution as it evolves. Back to the point made about security and where data sits. I would just want to add that things like DeepSeek allow for local use on either a local computer or local university server that to some extent may offer the protection that the others may not. So it's really looking at each large language model, what the pros and cons are, particularly when it comes to using research, whatever the case may be, using with extreme caution, because even those that are developing it are still evolving with it. But again, is to know that things like your DeepSeek could offer that kind of local use that doesn't allow it to feed into a central large language model. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I was just quickly looking to see whether my colleague Neil was in the room to get his input on that. I think that's a really useful contribution, Jude. There are some AI models that can be ring-fenced, and so they only work within a certain area. And you can develop your own AI bots. I mean, I've watched Neil developing AI bots in a matter of minutes. But of course, there are these complexities of where does the data that you upload go. And I'm certainly not an expert. I'm not an expert on that. So I think that there are important conversations that our universities need to be had. And I think those conversations have to include our students. And so that's what I want to finish off with, is just a bid to say that we need to have critical AI literacy development as part of our curricula. Now, you might take the position, for all sorts of moral and ethical reasons, to say that AI really is evil and that it's not useful for students at all, and you forbid your students from using it. I think that it's very possible to take that position, but I don't think it's useful to take that position as a policeman and say, I will hunt you down and catch you and you will fail, which seems to be the dominant discourse in our universities. It was the dominant discourse under plagiarism, pre-generative AI. So we've just replicated a model that never worked in regards to plagiarism. So you'd think we'd learn from our mistakes. But anyway, so I think that if you're going to take the position, no AI in any of my courses, it's no good to do it in a threatening manner. I think it has to be an open conversation about why you believe AI is problematic ethically, why you believe it's problematic educationally. And I think that has to be an ongoing conversation. I've chosen a slightly different route with my own students. I think AI is here to stay, and I think it's very useful. And I think there's going to be an expectation of graduates in the future, particularly doctoral graduates, that they can use the discipline-specific AI in critical ways. And so I see it, my view is that I need to make spaces to help students learn how to use it. And when I say learn how to use it, I'm not talking about the technicalities of how to write a good prompt. They can learn that from YouTube. I'm talking about learn how to use it as researchers in terms of critical conversations about what is the purpose of higher education, what is the purpose of knowledge, what is the purpose of research, not just once off, but to have ongoing conversations about what does it mean to get a doctorate? What does it mean to get a master's? Let's look at what the HEQSF says. What does that mean in our field of chemistry or social anthropology? Why should you care? If AI can do it for you, why don't you use AI? Or when should or shouldn't you? What might the implications be if you get away with it? You use AI, you don't actually read anything, you don't think anything, and you submit something that's produced by AI, and you get your certificate. You've won, great, because that certificate has currency out there. You maybe had some social mobility. What might be down the line implications if you've used AI in ways that have robbed you of that transformative relationship with knowledge? What might be the implications for you down the line if you've used AI in ways that have prevented you from having access to powerful knowledge? Those conversations, I think, are vital, not to shame them into not using AI necessarily, but to expose them and to talk, because we don't have the answers. But I think we need to be very clear that most of our students come to universities with an understanding that they are there to get a piece of paper. And we reinforce that in the way that we assess. There's very little room for failure. There's very little room for creativity and trying things out. So we reinforce this very problematic understanding of what a university is for, and our marketing materials. We are ranked #1. Come to us, you'll get a better job. We are the highest. So we constantly tell our students that that you're here for an instrumentalist relationship, which will get you a piece of paper, and our students come with that understanding. So we really have to realize, and I feel very passionately about this, with or without AI, that we have such a strong advocacy role to try and convince students over time that that a higher education is something that personally transforms you and gives you access to powerful knowledge that nobody can take away from you, and that can help you to make sense of new concepts, new contexts, new phenomena that didn't even exist when you did your studies. So I do think that role of advocacy for the power of knowledge was always strong. We have always neglected it, and it is much, 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 much more important now with generative AI than it ever was. And that can't be an add-on conversation that the librarians offer or the academic development offers. That's got to be something that's embedded in our courses. It can't be ad hoc. It's got to be actually curriculated and thought about, and it's not once off. This is ongoing conversations. And I do think that for me, this light green one in the middle is something I would do and recommend, but I also understand colleagues who take the position I will do those first 2 bullets, but I'm not going to do that third one. I'm not going to help my students understand what discipline-specific AI is out there and give them opportunities to play with it. I like to do that. I think it's useful to play in class to get them to be aware of the benefits and the shortcomings. I mean, the example I gave you earlier was to get a comparative article summaries in class and to talk about what it did or didn't do, to upload data, and I take all of the concerns raised today, and to look at how it's analyzed and whether you would have done it yourself, in that way. But most importantly, I believe we have a role in advocacy. So I am wrapping up. I love this paper as poem I found on the internet a couple of days ago by Joseph Bassano, for a student who used AI to write a paper. Now I let it fall back in the grasses. I hear you. I know. This life is hard now. I know your days are precious on this earth. But what are you trying to be free of? The living? The miraculous task of it? Love is for the ones who love the work. If you're not into poetry, you might find some other text. But really to engage with our students about the beauty of knowledge, the wonder of research, and the power that they can have when they do the intellectual work. And I think that alongside all of that, and this is my last slide, we need to, in our conversations about using AI in meaningful ways that don't take away the power of the personal relationship with knowledge, we also need to have conversations about who owns what generative AI produces, the questions we were asked earlier. What happens to the data we upload? What will generative AI do to trust in science and empirical evidence when seeing is not believing? I don't know if you're aware of how South Korea's president uses an AI bot of himself, which people can talk to, and it chats to individual citizens and gives funny dad jokes and is very likable and has had enormous benefits to his own popularity in the country. So just because it's a real video, I can see it's Sue that's talking. Seeing is not believing. We see that already now in South Africa with WhatsApp message voice notes that get forwarded and supposedly by somebody and are not by that person. There's already a lot of mistrust in science. There's, we've got the anti-vaccine movement, which is already leading to deaths around the world. We've got a lot of science skepticism. What is it going to mean when we've got generative AI? These are important questions we should be having as a higher education sector with each other and with our students. Who provided the labor? Well, it was actually very poor people in Kenya. And who gets the profits? Well, it's not the people in Kenya. What are the environmental costs of generative AI? This is an enormous one. Generative AI costs about 10 times as much. Every query that you put into a generative AI costs about 10 times as much water as a Google search. What are the implications of generative AI job losses in a highly unequal society? Who's going to lose their jobs? Who's going to be A-OK? What are the potential implications of botshit? We've already seen court cases around a legal court case where someone cited legal precedents in their court case which didn't exist. They were botshit. We've seen an NHS case in the UK where transcriptions of meetings were botshit. What do we do about the racist and sexist biases of generative AI? Are we talking to our students about the fact that generative AI is trained on materials that are inherently sexist and racist, and that as we rely more and more on generative AI, we may in fact reinforce that? And then I think the important discipline-specific questions that we might ask, like, is a poem or picture that's developed by generative AI meaningful? And maybe if you're a literature group, a literature course, is it meaningful? Why? Why not? If you can identify all those lovely things that we were taught in literature in the poem, does it still have meaning? Maybe one for sociology, who's left out when you ask generative AI to frame society or to respond to questions about society, who's being left out? So I think there's important questions that we should be having. So to end, and I'm sorry I've spoken for so long, I think we need to keep going back to the start. We need to keep the conversation going. But the start is, what is a postgraduate education? What is it? What is it for? What do we do research for? And only if we can hold on to our responses to those questions can we begin to engage in conversations about AI. We are currently having too many decontextualized conversations about generative AI, which is all about catching students using AI, that I think are singularly unhelpful. And we should be having conversations that are based on our deep understanding of what research is for. Thank you so much. Sorry, that was so rushed.
Not at all, Sue. That was absolutely amazing, as you can see from all the little applause hands that are coming up for you. I hope that we can have a bit more discussion now. We do have a bit of time, but I would like to just say that I really appreciated the depth as well as the breadth of what you have presented to us, Sue. There's so much to think about. And there is a lot going on in the chat. I'm not going to read it all out to you, but I think there's a lot of people who would like to perhaps make some comments and ask some questions. So if it's okay with you, I'll ask people to put up their hands if they do want to make a comment. The comments that are in the chat we can go back to. They are just for noting. There are one or two about using AI to manage large volumes of student contributions. I was going to ask one about using AI for assessment, which is, I know, very controversial. So there's a lot about the breadth of knowledge, the huge amounts of data that we can have help with. But I do think that people would like maybe to have a direct conversation now. So colleagues, let me ask you if you would like to make a comment or ask a question, to please use your hand, your electronic hand, and we'll go from there, and perhaps we can discuss some of the issues that you have been raising as we've been going. The first one that comes up on my screen is Louis Duplessis. If you'd like to unmute and go ahead.
Colleagues, good morning and thank you very much. I'm from the Durban University of Technology, and recently well, not so recently, but my role has changed to being one of primarily around quality assurance in postgraduate studies. But I think what I'm often dealing with is people who are very stuck in an old system. You know, this is how we are producing things. This is how we are supervising. This is how we were supervised. And trying to get them to engage with that very important thing about what is the fundamental that we are trying to get out of our students is quite problematic, because, you know, the busyness of higher education and all that they have to do, I think they don't feel that they have the space to actually engage with those sorts of things. They're just thinking about, my KPI says I have to graduate X amount of students. But even in my lecturing prior to this role, it was very much about what are we actually trying to achieve? And I think that is the fundamental. In doctoral students, in students that we lecture, getting back to the basics. What are we actually trying to impart to the students with the assignment? Is it that they are just reproducing knowledge, or are they synthesizing knowledge, or are they demonstrating an understanding of knowledge, etc., etc.? So that's just what I wanted to say. Getting back to what is it that we're actually wanting to do, I echo, is the key thing for actually all of our engagements with our students, whether it's on AI or, you know, data collection. What are we actually trying to do? Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thanks,
Lee.
Louis.
Yeah.
Oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead, Sue.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. Exactly. We need to have, having said that, I do think that a lot of the problem with academics is that they do feel that they are being managed into oblivion. And so, you know, you're spending your time filling in KPIs and writing reports. And so there is so little time for these hugely important conversations about what the heck is a university for in society, and what kind of relationship to knowledge do we want in our third years or in our master's students, and why, and what would it look like? And I think that and then of course we've got the pressure to publish, which is also related to our KPIs. So I think that in a way we've structured the university in such an instrumentalist way that we have neglected these big conversations. And so we have done some of this to ourselves. And then we replicate that in the classroom, where there's so little opportunity for students to experiment, to submit an article, a piece of writing, to get some feedback, to fail again, to try it out a different way. And to use that feedback and resubmit. You know, every assignment they do, it feels to me, is for a summative mark. And there's no time in the syllabus to do that intellectual game playing, which is absolutely fundamental to knowledge making. So I think both in terms of our teaching and learning and in terms of how we manage ourselves in our university, we perhaps are working against taking part, you know, participating in these bigger conversations. I think that in some ways, perhaps generative AI is just throwing up stuff that is that has been problematic for a while, and now it's, you know, we're seeing it in crisis mode, but the problem's been there for a bit.
Thank you. Lynn Morris, your question?
Great, thanks so much. Thanks, Sue. Thanks, Stephanie. You know, I think you know, this is an area we obviously all grappling with in higher education, and it's kind of an area where, you know, the students are outsmarting us as academics. You know, they're kind of ahead of us actually on this issue. But I also, you know, I think it's important also to make the distinction, and obviously this is about postgrads, but, you know, we're also all grappling with the undergrad issues. But, you know, in the postgrad space, I think it is much clearer. We want our postgrad students to use these tools because they're very useful. I mean, those of you who, you know, have used AlphaFold, for instance, you know, I mean, these are just phenomenal tools that are going to help our research. So I think in the postgrad space, it is about then much more about the responsible, you know, use, because you do want them to use it actively. And, you know, I think this sort of adage that the smart students are going to use AI more effectively. So that in itself, you know, that they're going to just be get much more out of it. But I guess what I really would like some help and advice on, because we're all grappling with this. In fact, we have a graduate studies meeting next week specifically to, you know, to discuss this. Is some practical advice. You know, do we need to have sort of brand new policies
or do we adapt our existing policies, and how rigid should they be? And, you know, I think, you know, that one of the things that we are doing is just getting students to sign a declaration to say which AI tools they've used, because we also don't want to give them the impression that they can't use AI. So maybe to, you know, what tools did they use, what did they use it for, and so that might become a standard part of a thesis. And then, of course, the other issue is the oral exam. You know, do we really have to then be probing students deeply about what is theirs and what isn't theirs? So perhaps maybe just some kind of practical you know, advice would be useful. Thanks.
Thanks, Lynn. Lynn,
would you like to
Lynn,
comment?
yeah, thanks, Stephanie. Lynn, is that Lynn from Manor Gardens, Durban?
Sorry, no, sorry, Lynn
No.
Morris. I'm the DVC at WITS. Sorry.
Oh,
I should have
okay,
introduced myself.
No, that's
Apologies.
absolutely fine. I just thanks, Lynn. Yeah, look, I'm going to give you my personal views. Obviously, all of this is my personal views. When it comes to policy, is that I think in South Africa we think that policies are laws, and so we want to pin down the nitty-gritty details as if it were a law. And I think that this is a real problem, because then people can use that to articulate why they didn't follow it. Because you said, I don't know, you said there's no eating after 9 p.m. Well, it was 2 minutes to 9, or it was whatever. You know, I think that what we need are principles, and they might be written into a policy. But what are the principles? And that goes back to the bigger conversation of what are you here for? What do we want? Drawing on the HEQSF, drawing on the doctoral standard. This is who we want you to be. And AI can enhance that process, and it can constrain it. And to the extent that you are using AI in ways that prevent you from having this personal understanding of the knowledge, that prevent you from making personal meaning, and to the extent that you present what you get from AI as text that you have written when it wasn't, or as data that you have personally analyzed when you didn't, that's problematic. So I'm not answering your question precisely, but just to say that I think that if we have policies, we're a country that has a gazillion policies in our universities that nobody reads, and that are nitpicking detail and are far too long. So we're in an era of flux. I think it'd be much more useful to have a short document, which could be called a policy, but which is principles. These are the kind of fundamental principles underpinning our understanding of AI. That would be my view. You mentioned a tool that I just didn't get. So would you mind popping that in the meeting chat, because there are a million AI tools out there, and yeah, and so we all kind of get the one that we know and use that, and that it would be nice to find out which one you're referring to. And then finally, you spoke about a VAVA. I'm a big believer in VAVAs. I think that the CHE, briefly speaking, well, I can't remember what number it was, but you know, the CHE produced the briefly speaking, the short text on various topics, and the short one on the VAVA might be useful to read, which looks at why given that the national report on the doctoral review that Stephanie was a co-author of actually sort of recommended that we consider the use of the VAVA more widely. I think that as a sector, we really should be engaging with it. And that document sort of just presents a kind of a summary of what the literature says on the issue of the VAVA. And one of the things that I think is very clear from the literature on the VAVA is that it can be the space in which plagiarism or AI use that negated the student's personal understanding, it becomes evident. But it should not be its purpose, because it should never be an interrogation. It should be a collegial conversation between examiners. And yes, there's always a power difference, and it's always very, very scary, but it shouldn't be set up as the space in which we will catch students plagiarizing, or we will catch students who've used AI in problematic ways. As I say, it may well be the place where that becomes evident, which would be awful, but it would then need to be dealt with. But ideally, certainly the literature makes very clear that if there are any doubts by the examiners as to authenticity, authorship, at the stage of examining the written text. That needs to be dealt with before the viva takes place. I just want to very quickly share my screen again. I want to very quickly, because it speaks a little bit, I think, to what you're saying, talk about AI detectors. Those of you who know my work about Turnitin will probably know what I'm going to say. But there really is a real problem with using AI detection. Those institutions that use Turnitin already, probably problematically, it's worth noting that Turnitin is banned in a great many US colleges because US students are litigious. Our students are generally not litigious, and so they take it when we treat them badly or falsely accuse them. In the US, students take the academics and the university to court, and Turnitin in its small print makes very clear that if there is any litigation, it's between the student and the university, and that they wash their hands of it, which is why Turnitin is generally not used in a lot of US colleges. But in South Africa, we have been less critical of our use of Turnitin. And within Turnitin, when they introduced, and my colleagues Neil and Nicola are in the room, so they can certainly speak to this more if we need to hear more about it. But when they introduced the Turnitin AI detector, it was automatically introduced. So it wasn't something you sort of opted in, and very significantly, it provided reports to the academic and not to the student. And the moment that we start surveilling our students to the extent that they don't even know what we're watching them for, we no longer have an educational relationship with our students. We are in a credentialing business, and that's all we're in. So I think there's really important reasons that we have to be very, very careful of using AI detection. Of course, the AI detectors have AI themselves. So you're paying big ed tech to give you AI, and then you're paying big ed tech to tell you when the students are using AI. Very interestingly, it's interesting to see an article, and again, I want to say thanks to my colleagues Nicola and Neil for alerting me to so many of these pieces. You know, that large language models are actually starting to recognize when a student is second language, is a non-native speaker of English, and then becomes more critical and is likely to flag more false positives of AI use. There are very clearly, a lot of researchers found this around the world, biased against non-native writers and biased against novice academic writers, whether they're native speakers of English or not. The way in which our first-year students write, let's face it, it's extremely boring and formulaic, is very similar to the way in which the most basic ChatGPT outputs look. They look so similar. So it's important to note that generative AI doesn't identify at some kind of metadata level, you know, behind the scenes. Oh yes, the student used it. Doesn't. It's simply the exact same way that generative AI produces text. It looks for the most common patterns, and it says, these patterns look familiar. This is probably generative AI. Well, they look familiar in part if it's an entirely authentic student text who didn't use generative AI. Of course, they're going to look familiar because they are the exact kind of producing the exact kind of text on which generative AI was produced. And places like Washington Post are actually giving, you know, this is what you must do legally if you get falsely accused. This is what to do. These are your steps you must take. Of course, it's in America, so they tell you hire a lawyer. And of course, the ed tech that sells you AI is now selling you, you know, AI humanizers. So you can use AI to write the document, and then you can use this software to make sure that it doesn't have any of the kind of phrases and patterns that AI detectors look for when they're supposedly identifying use of AI. But remember, they cannot identify use of AI. They can only identify the use of most formulaic patterns and so on. So, you know, we get ourselves into an absolute knot. That's just a joke, by the way, that Philip Dawson, another person you should really follow if you're interested in things AI, because he said he's written an AI detector that is detects 100% of AI. But it's a joke, because those of you who know coding will know that all it does is says that all the text is AI.
Sue, there are a couple of other questions. Let me ask those colleagues. The first one is Bulumko Mapkata. Would you like to go ahead?
Good day, colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity. It's Bulumko Mapokata from the University of Fort Hare. I think an interesting point was raised by Lynn from Verts, where she did say that in the case of a student who's been caught using AI, in fact, not in the case of a student that's been caught using AI, but they do encourage students to actually come forward and say, okay, these are the AI tools I've used, and I've used them for this in particular. So I just wanted to ask, is that a method that they are currently adopting, or is that a method they are proposing?
To say that they've used AI. Okay, Laura's asking at WITS, answering at WITS, if I've understood you correctly. At WITS, their own position statements inappropriate. Lynn, do you want to answer?
Yeah, so I'm not sure I quite understood the question, but I think it's related to the declaration.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so students are asked, and this is just in our Faculty of Science at the moment, and we're planning on rolling that out to our other faculties, is that they ask specifically which tools that they use, because as I said, some tools we want students to use, and I just put the AlphaFold one in the chat for those that do molecular modeling. But then, ask specifically which tools you used and what you used them for. And if you do use tools for readability or for writing, you need to give a sense of what you used it for. So it's a declaration. And I guess that's really pushing this idea about research integrity and people being, using it responsibly. So that would go as a kind of as part of the thesis, in the same way that I think people write a declaration, this is my own unaided work. It's almost like an extension of the declaration that we already ask our students to put in.
Oh, okay. I thought there's a different way you do it. Okay, thank you.
I see Brett's got his hands up. He may actually be able to add to this because he's intimately involved with this.
Okay, let's get Brett. Anna, I have seen you, and we'll come to you now. But
Sorry,
Brett, if you...
Yeah, I was trying to type. I put my hand up. Yeah, just to quickly consolidate what the DVC say. So what we've done is we've asked for full transparency, and as Sue had said, we've got a set of fundamental principles that we've embedded in our Senate standing orders, but we deferred to the faculties because we realized that different disciplines are positioned differently in relation to the use of AI. I mean, some of the biochemists use it in a very different way to say the literature students. So each faculty has been mandated to come up with its own particular position statement, but they're all bound by a set of foundational principles in the Senate standing orders.
Thank you. Thanks, Brett. Let's move on. Anna, you had your hand up for quite a long time.
Hi, yes. I'm Katrina Womack from the Durban University of Technology. I just respectfully want to disagree a little bit with Sue, because I do use Turnitin and I do look at the AI, but with my undergrads, what I tell the students is I confront them. You've used AI, you haven't acknowledged it, please redo it, and then they will admit to using it and they will rework it. With the postgrads, I've only encountered it now for the first time in a proposal, and I was absolutely shocked because this particular student actually signed the declaration saying that they didn't use AI, and if they used AI, they would acknowledge it. So I do impress on them if they're going to use it, they need to be ethical, they need to disclose. So I don't see Turnitin as such a bad thing. I think we can use it and we can guide our students and assist our students to use AI in an ethical and responsible fashion if they do use it. That's what I wanted to say.
Thanks, Anna. Let me briefly respond to you. I think it sounds like you're using it in a really great way, because you're using it to have a conversation with the student. The thing I said was unethical was that the report on AI use goes to the lecturer and it doesn't go to the student, and I think that is unethical. If you are doing surveillance on a student, the student should know about it. So for me, it's about how Turnitin has set it up so that the report, not the similarity index report, but the AI detector report goes to the academic. Unless that has recently changed, Neil, if it has, let me know in the chat bar. But certainly as far as I know, and that for me was very problematic. But you are using it to have a conversation. I think what's really important though is that we need to understand that our students, that the AI detection doesn't tell you that they've actually that they've used AI. It tells you that there is the possibility. Okay, Neil says it's still only viewable to the lecturer, but there's the possibility that they've used AI because we recognize certain patterns of text which AI usually produce. So we just need to be very, very careful of how we confront students. I know of a case in Australia recently. I know of it personally because it's a friend of mine's child. Who was accused of using AI. She hadn't used AI, but she was a first-year student, and her essay was boring. And so, and it used all those academic words that students think are so useful, like however, and therefore, and thus, and all the things that are flagged typically as AI use, and having it in short paragraphs and having it in lists. And she was accused, and she was very, very upset. And it's a different world out there. They've straight away brought in lawyers, and the university had to pay emotional damages. So I think let's be careful that we're not accusing students, but we're raising the issue that the AI detector suggests that there might be, and is that the case, and why would why would you use AI? Because blame and shame hasn't got us anywhere with plagiarism, but conversations about the reality is it's hell of a stressful to be a first-year student, and if you're working in a language that's not your own, if you're coming from a school situation that didn't prepare you as well as perhaps some others in the class, the pressures are even higher, and so of course people take shortcuts. Of course there's no time for the intellectual engagement, and they don't even know where to start. So I think it's important for us to understand why students are doing these things, so that we can engage with them pedagogically rather than as policemen ready to punish them. So, and then as to the declaration, I won't go into detail on that, but if someone's going to use AI, if they're going to use AI in a way that is fundamentally cheating, in other words, I'm not going to read the required texts, I'm not going to write a word of the essay which I'm meant to write on the basis of those required texts, I'm going to upload them onto Claude, and I'm going to download the article that comes out at the end. So if they're using that in that fundamental cheating way, why would they do that and then not sign a declaration saying that they didn't? Of course you would. So for me, declarations I just don't understand, why would you cheat, and why would you think that someone would blatantly cheat but not be willing to lie? Anyway.
Okay, we're coming to the end, but Laura has her hand up, so you go ahead, Laura.
Thanks so much. Sue, I wanted to ask you about the process of learning. There's been a lot of talk in the literature, and I see that Catherine has shared a piece by Leon Furs, who writes extensively about maintaining creativity and criticality in working with AI. But it's been a hard one to do with assessment. And then there's a lot of talk about how we need students to reflect on their processes of learning, alongside their intellectual understanding, as you've pointed out. And I just wondered if there've been any developments in this whole area. And I suppose it would mean that we'd have to shift our assessment practices quite a lot. But it's very hard given the contextual constraints we face. Thanks.
Yeah, I started off by saying I have more questions than answers, so I can end on saying that too. I don't think there's a simple solution. I do think that we're probably going to use more oral exams, but I worry that oral exams are being seen not as an opportunity for students to speak their knowledge and to get instant feedback on their speaking of their knowledge, but are understood purely as we're going to make sure you don't cheat because we're going to ask you in front of us. And I think we need to hold on to the value of oral assessment for other reasons as well. I think that we are going to. You're right, Laura. It's a major shift. I think we've got to have a major shift. I think we're long overdue for that major shift anyway. Instead, we're going to have a little bit of a backlash where everyone goes back to, okay, it's 3-hour closed book exams. That's the only way we can be sure. I think that's going to happen for a while, but I think in the end, we're going to have to be much more innovative, much more creative, and not innovative in terms of making AI-proof assignments. Please don't get me wrong. More innovative in terms of having conversations with our students about the value of knowledge and getting them to get opportunities to creatively engage with knowledge and try things out in class and on their own, and not just try out using AI, but try out playing with ideas, being more playful. That entails a lot more space for failure, which is one of the great things about doctoral level, by the way, which I feel we don't have at undergraduate level. There's so much opportunity for students to fail along the way in a doctorate, because you know they only have to get it right by the end when they submit the thesis. So there's so many opportunities for students to write poorly, write badly, get the wrong end of the stick, go down a dead end. I wish that we could give more opportunities like that to our undergraduates.
Okay, colleagues, we have more or less used up our time, and I don't see any other hands up. There's plenty still comments going on in the chat, and we will record those, of course. But I think we've reached an interesting point of recognizing something that I'm very pleased that we are now using the word opportunity as opposed to threat. Just to recount, about 2 years ago at this time of the year, I was in Australia and had lunch with a colleague who was also a Deputy Vice Chancellor. And he said to me at the time, Australia is never going to let their students use these AI things. We are going to shut them down. We're just going to stop it. They're never going to be allowed to do that. Of course, you can't. And of course, they haven't. And in fact, I think our colleagues in Australia are being as practical about it as we are trying to be. So hearing all about this, I think we've come quite a long way. And having this amazing presentation from Sue, which has given us so much coverage, something which we probably weren't even imagining a year ago. So I hope we finish this conversation on the very positive point that has been made by Sue and by others, that here's opportunities to help our students to engage with what they are doing, how they are learning, and for ourselves as well. I do think we as academics, as supervisors, as leaders in higher education, have quite a lot still to learn. I'm quite sure there's nobody in this room who thinks that they know everything they need to know about using these systems. But we have lots of opportunities now to learn, and I'm very happy that we've been able to have this discussion. I'm sure we will have a follow-up. I'm sure that there will be plenty of other discussion points that we can reach. But we're all on the learning curve. And Sue, I do want to say thank you very much to you for taking us further along that learning curve. Your presentation has been amazing. And I certainly have a lot to think about myself. I just briefly want to point out to you that USAF does host a community of practice on digital learning. They have a workshop coming up. I did put it in the chat. A workshop on AI policies, but I think this is obviously something that we all need to be discussing. So, as Sue says, we have lots more questions than answers, but this is a conversation which we can continue to have. And I think it's given me a great deal to think about. And for those of you who know me, I filled 2 pages of mind map notes during this discussion, even though we are chairing. So I think it's the beginning. And I think we as the community of practice will have a follow-up as soon as we can, so that we could ask some more questions. And perhaps, Sue, the next time we'll ask colleagues to send in comments and questions and make contributions before we start the workshop. And it'll just get even richer. So, okay, I'm going to give one last person an opportunity to say something, because it's Engela. Engela, over to you for just a minute.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a very interesting and useful session. I would just like to ask that you please circulate the date of the new workshop. Due to some other reason, I'm not able to access the chat. So I can't chat and I can't read the chat. I would appreciate that, please.
Sure. Yes, I can tell you that it is May. I'll find it for you. Because it's 22nd of May at 12 o'clock, but you will find it on the USAF website, USAF Digital Education Community of Practice. Okay, we will circulate that. And once more, let me say thank you very much, primarily to Sue for her amazing presentation. Thank you, all of you who have been listening and who have contributed to the discussion. And this is one of those, watch this space. We will have another discussion as soon as we can. So colleagues, thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Thanks.
Thanks,
you.
bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.